Welcome to our Sleepy Story channel, where timeless tales gently unfold to soothe your mind and carry you into peaceful dreams. Tonight, we invite you on a journey into the mystical world of the ancient snake gods, the Nagas of Hindu mythology. Beneath the surface of rivers and soil lies a shimmering realm of jeweled palaces, cosmic serpents, and ageless wisdom woven through stories of courage, balance, and renewal. Let this enchanting saga of serpents and secrets lull you softly as we dive deep into a land where myth and magic intertwine, and the rhythm of water and life flow eternal. Relax, breathe deeply, and drift away into the dance of the snake gods. In the ancient, mystical fabric of Hindu mythology, the realm of the snake gods, or the Nagas, unfolds as a world teeming with wonder, power, and deep symbolic significance. These celestial serpents, half human and half snake, are not mere creatures of the earth but custodians of profound secrets and divine energies. Their stories weave through the vast epics, scriptures, and folklore of India, drawing us into a captivating tapestry that blends cosmic battles, serene underwater palaces, and the delicate balance between creation and destruction. The world of the Nagas is said to exist in a hidden dimension parallel to the human realm, often described as Patala, the subterranean netherworld beneath the earth. This realm is no dark abyss but a lush, vibrant kingdom filled with jeweled caves, flowing rivers of nectar, and magnificent palaces built of precious metals. It is a place where time and space flow differently, governed by the ancient laws of the cosmic order. The Nagas themselves are children of the sage Kashyapa and his wife Kadru, born from an egg-like origin that symbolizes rebirth and eternal cycles. The great serpent king, Vasuki, one of the most revered among the Nagas, serves as a powerful symbol of the cosmic axis around whom the events of the universe revolve. He is famously known for his role in the churning of the ocean of milk. The Samudra Manthan, a legendary episode where the Devas gods and Asuras demons collaborated to obtain Amrita, the nectar of immortality. Vasuki, coiled around Mount Mandara, became the churning rope, his strength enduring the immense forces unleashed during this titanic struggle. This story signifies the eternal battle between good and evil, ignorance and knowledge, with the serpent at the heart of transformation and renewal. The Nagas themselves are guardians of treasures, both earthly and spiritual. They hold the key to hidden knowledge, medicinal herbs, and powerful mantras. Their presence is often invoked in rituals to ensure fertility, protection, and well-being. Temples dedicated to snake gods, the Indian landscape, where devotees offer milk and prayers for safeguarding against poison and misfortune. Their divine nature is complex, embodying both benevolence and wrath, creation and destruction, life-giving waters and deadly venom. Mythologies recount numerous encounters between Nagas and great heroes, sages, and gods. The serpent Ananta, or Shisha, meaning endless one, is the cosmic serpent that supports Lord Vishnu as he rests between cycles of creation. Shisha embodies infinity and eternity, often depicted with multiple heads, each spitting venom that transforms into the eternal waters from which the cosmos is born again and again. His form is the bed upon which Vishnu reclines, symbolizing the unchanging substratum of all existence amidst the ceaseless flux of the universe. Then there is Takshaka, the king of the Nagas during the time of the Mahabharata, whose story is intertwined with that of the great warrior Arjuna and the Kuru dynasty. Tokshoka's tale is one of vengeance, power, and tragedy, an illustration of the fragile ties between the human and Nāga worlds. His deadly bite causes the death of King Parikshit, Arjuna's grandson, setting off a chain of events that ripple through the epic's vast narrative. The stories reveal not just fearsome power, but also complex relationships of honor, loyalty, and cosmic justice. Within these legends, the Nagas are not only mythical creatures, but also metaphors for the forces of nature and the mind's hidden depths. The serpent shedding its skin represents rebirth and renewal, a symbol deeply embedded in spiritual practices aiming at transformation. In yogic traditions, the energy known as Kundalini is often depicted as a coiled serpent at the base of the spine, holding the power to awaken consciousness and transcendence. Thus, the mythology of snake gods extends beyond stories into the realms of symbolism, psychology, and spiritual aspiration. The Nāga world is also a place of profound beauty and martial prowess. The serpents are often described as possessing hypnotic charm, adorned with precious gems along their bodies, and capable of shifting between human and snake forms. They engage in battles with gods and demons alike, their venom capable of both destruction and healing. Intricate tales recount their alliances and enmities, their wisdom and caprices, weaving a narrative rich with lessons on balance, power, and humility. These mythic narratives also speak of the subtle boundaries between the mortal and divine worlds, where the Nagas serve as intermediaries, teachers, and sometimes tricksters. Their stories invite us to explore themes of loyalty, secrecy, the sanctity of oaths, and the reverence due to nature's hidden forces. Through these expansive tales, the Hindu mythology of snake gods opens doors to a mystical dimension where the spiritual and earthly realms converge in an eternal dance. Deep within the jeweled recesses of Patala, the Nāga world bears a peace undisturbed by the cycles of mortal kingdoms above. The palaces shine with radiant blue, emerald, and ruby stones set into smooth walls, each hall illuminated by the glow of rare gems. The air is filled with the scent of pristine lotus, and rivers of sweet nectar flow in gentle currents through manicured gardens, where soft music rises, spun from the scales of smaller, gentle serpents who dwell among the flower beds. Though the Nagas are often associated with darkness and secrets, their civilization thrives in an ethereal light that belongs only to their world, a light untouchable by sun or moon, coming from the treasures hidden in the earth since the dawn of creation. In these magnificent chambers, Vasuki surveys his kingdom with wisdom and caution, for the Nagas must balance their own interests with the cosmic harmony dictated by the gods. The major Nāga families, descendants of his siblings Shisha, Takshaka, Karkotaka, and others, hold ancient councils beneath vaulted ceilings of gold. Here, they discuss alliances and the protection of treasures, both physical and magical, sharing legends passed down through the ages. It is said that the Nagas possess knowledge of worlds beyond imagining. Legends even recount ancient maps inscribed on the scales of the eldest serpents, shifting and shimmering with clues to the location of hidden rivers, medicinal herbs that can cure any affliction, and secret passages between realms. The Nagas are teachers, but only to those deemed worthy, those who can approach their domain with humility and reverence, aware of the deep mysteries hiding in plain sight. Many a sage, seeking liberation or wisdom, has ventured into Patala at peril to life and limb, hoping to return with a fraction of the Serpent King's knowledge. The stories of lucky sages illustrate the Naga's complex relationship with humankind. In the remote past, the great ascetic Astika, a child born of both Brahmin and Naga parentage, intervened in a conflict that threatened his maternal kin. King Jinnamajaya, son of the slain Parikshit, sought revenge against Takshaka and the Nagas for his father's death. He began the horrific Sarpa Satra, a sacrificial ritual meant to destroy all snakekind. As the fires blazed higher and higher, sucking countless Nagas into oblivion, Astika, compelled by Dharma, courage, and love for his mother's people, pleaded with the king for an end to the carnage. Impressed by Astika's wisdom and virtue, Jinnamajaya relented, sparing Takshaka and the surviving Nagas. Thus, the Nagas' fate was preserved, and their world continued. But this episode served as a warning: the cosmic balance must always be maintained. Nagas are neither wholly benevolent nor wicked. Their wrath can bring drought and poison, but their grace can bestow fertility and abundance. This duality is often reflected in the temples and rituals dedicated to Nagadeva throughout India. Small altars, sometimes carved from stone or clay, can be found under ancient trees or beside streams. Devotees offer milk, turmeric, and flowers, believing they appease the serpentine guardians of water and earth and invoke their benevolence. Children in villages are told tales of serpent goddesses who emerge at midnight from rivers, their shoulders gleaming with jewels and their thoughts full of secrets. In Bengal, the goddess Manasa is worshipped as the queen of the Nagas, presiding over rains, cures for snake bite, and the prosperity of crops. Her story, rife with struggle and triumph, speaks of resilience. For centuries, she was denied proper worship by men, but gained her divinity through the fervent devotion of women and the poor, who saw her as both a patron and an avenger. Whenever disaster strikes, drought, flood, or epidemic, the people turn to Manasa, offering songs and prayers in hope of relief and justice. Across North India, snake worship becomes especially pronounced during Nag Panchami, a festival celebrating the Nagas with great joy and reverence. On this day, households clean their altars and courtyards, painting serpentine motifs, preparing sweets, and bringing forth clay images of Nagadeva. Rituals are performed to ensure harmony with the natural world, protect children from snakebite, and secure a bountiful harvest. Stories are recited of brave heroes and mystical serpents, of magical worlds mirroring our own, and of kings who learned humility from the hidden wisdom of snake gods. At the edge of the mortal world and the mystical Patala Borderlands team with legends of forbidden love between humans and Nagas, reminding us that the boundaries between worlds are not impassable. Tales whisper of princesses who fall in love with handsome Naga princes, enchanting and tragic in equal measure. Some are transformed into serpents themselves, destined to reign alongside their beloved beneath the earth. Others return to the world of mortals, carrying with them cures for deadly diseases, knowledge of hidden treasures, or stories of gardens that bloom forever beneath rivers and mountains. Among the Nagas, the great Shishya stands apart. As the cosmic support of Vishnu, he rarely leaves his vast meditation beneath the universe. Yet, he gently guides the destinies of his kin and the fate of worlds. He is said to bear the planets upon his hoods, spinning them through the endless yugas, epochs of creation and destruction. Sometimes his gaze finds the mortal realm, and those who encounter Shisha feel a profound sense of infinity, knowing that their lives are part of a cycle much greater than themselves. The Naga's affinity for water echoes through Hindu mythology's many rivers and lakes. It is believed that every body of water holds a serpent guardian, divine beings who maintain the delicate balance between fertility and flood, purity and poison. Some legends say the Nagas can sense disturbances in the flow of cosmic energy and respond by shifting the waters, bringing drought or rain as needed. The river Ganga herself is sometimes depicted as descending from the heavens, cushioned on the heads of many Nagas, ensuring her flow is measured and gentle, her gifts spread evenly across the land. Beyond their world, the Nagas have often found themselves enmeshed in the affairs of powerful gods and mortals. In the Ramayana, the Serpent King Vasuki reappears alongside other Nagas to aid the gods in cosmic tasks and battles. In the Mahabharata, they take sides, protect bloodlines, and sometimes tempt mortals with promises of forbidden power. Instead of simple monsters, they exist as nuanced beings with kingdoms, families, loves, and loyalties. Their troubles are not unlike those of humankind. Envy may breed feuds. Pride can lead to downfall. But compassion and wisdom are never far from the serpent heart. The philosophical resonance of the Nagas stretches into the deepest symbolism of Hindu yoga and spiritual practice. Kundalini, the dormant, spiritual energy said to lie coiled at the base of the spine, is imagined as a sleeping serpent. When awakened by discipline, meditation, and grace, Kundalini surges upward, transforming the seeker with insights and powers beyond ordinary perception. In ascetic caves and sacred forests, yogis meditate upon the image of the serpent, visualizing energy rising, passing through chakras, unfurling the latent potential hidden in all. The legacy of Nagas also remains etched in the landscape. Cities like Nagpur bear their name, believed to have once been ruled by serpent kings or blessed by their presence. Ancient artifacts, coins, sculptures, engraved pillars bear the image of serpent deities, sometimes intertwined in complex patterns, signifying both the dangers and the blessings they offer. In some stories, the Nagas are even said to guard sacred jewels and artifacts meant only for the worthy. Such treasures are believed to hold magical powers, capable of bestowing wisdom, prosperity, or even entry into hidden realms. As the cosmic drama unfolds across millennia, the Nagas endure, their legends multiplying with each generation. Their cries echo in the monsoon's thunder. Their wisdom flickers in the eyes of sages and the devotion of worshippers. Their dazzling colors flash in sacred festivals. In their world beneath the surface, they weave stories of triumph and tragedy, secrecy and revelation, transformation and eternity, reminding all creation that the serpent, both feared and revered, is necessary for the universe to survive and renew. Far beneath the shifting patterns of the mortal sky, where light filters only as a faint green shimmer through miles of soil and stone, the Naga kingdoms bask in their timeless rhythm. Patala is not silent. It hums with a sound that is not quite music, a steady pulse like the heartbeat of the earth itself. In the grand city of Bhogavati, the central seat of Naga power, streets paved with iridescent stones wind between towering crystal spires, The walls are engraved with scenes of ancient victories, cosmic alliances, and battles fought long before humans walked the earth. Columns resemble colossal serpents spiraling toward jeweled domes, their eyes inlaid with emerald and their scales flashing like 1,000 rainbows in the glow of sacred lamps. The Naga court gathers on a dais made from moonstone, beneath an arch carved to mimic the coil of the endless Shisha. Here, Vasuki presides over disputes, diplomatic missions, and prophecies. His council consists of wise Naga elders and emissaries from allied realms, celestial beings, river spirits, and even wandering sages who have earned the right to speak before the king. The air is thick with the mingling scents of frankincense and sandalwood. Priests murmur ancient mantras, their voices carrying over courtyards that open out into shimmering pools where lotus flowers as large as shields drift lazily. One fateful season, unusual turbulence rippled through the currents of the underworld rivers. A disturbance was felt in the cosmic balance, sensed first by the youngest serpents in playful swims, and then confirmed by the oracles. The flows of sacred waters, those veins of the world from which the Nagas draw both sustenance and power, had begun to slow in places and surge uncontrollably in others. Some believed it a sign of divine displeasure, others feared a rift between realms was being forced open. Vasuki himself rose from meditation, his hood expanded in quiet alarm, for such imbalances rarely occurred without grave cause. The Naga priests conducted night-long ceremonies, invoking Varuna, guardian of cosmic waters, and offering up shimmering pearls and rare blossoms in exchange for answers. The visions spoke of a breach between realms caused by human greed, artifacts of power stolen from sacred caves, amulets bearing the breath of ancient serpents sold into markets above ground. These sacred items, created in ages past to regulate the subtle bonds between Patala and the physical world, had been disturbed. Without them, the delicate circulation of cosmic energy was breaking into chaos. Vasuki dispatched his heralds to every corner of the Naga world, to Shisha's meditative plane, to the swift and cunning Tokshoka's fortress, to the farthest tributaries where Kakotoka's kind ruled with silent ferocity. Messengers also rose to the surface, appearing in dreams to select sages and kings, warning them that the peace between earth and underworld now depended on the return of what had been taken. Some humans woke frightened, dismissing the visions. Others began pilgrimages in hopes of earning the Serpent King's favor. Amidst these events, a tale unfolded that blended the destinies of mortals and Nagas more closely than either realm would have chosen. In a distant kingdom, by the banks of the Yamuna, a young prince named Devadatta was plagued by troubling dreams. Each night, he would find himself standing upon a river of stars, facing a woman whose skin shimmered like scaled pearl and whose eyes shifted in hue like the depths of the sea. She would call to him without words, beckoning him to follow. Always, just as he reached her, the stars beneath his feet would shatter into darkness, and he would wake breathless. When Devadatta sought counsel from his royal seers, they whispered that he had been touched by Naga fate. Such dreams did not come unbidden, they were a summons. Though his ministers feared the journey, his heart and sense of Dharma pushed him onward, guided only by fragments from his nightly visions. He traveled through forests where rivers curved like serpentine bodies and over mountains whose peaks were carved like the hoods of cobras. Along the way, he learned the customs of snake worshippers, how to pour libations of milk into sacred anthills, how to step lightly at dusk when serpents emerged to drink, and how never to speak of a Naga's name without reverence. One evening, as monsoon lightning shaped jagged patterns across the clouds, Devadatta took shelter in a hollow beside a great banyan tree. There, a voice rose from the roots themselves, a sibilant, patient whisper. The ground shifted, and a massive Naga, his emerald scales glistening with rainlight, emerged. It was Kakataka, whose venom was said to paralyze not the body, but the mind, freezing thoughts in eternal stillness. Yet the king did not strike. Instead, he lowered his great hood and spoke of the prince's destiny. Devadatta was to seek the lost amulet of Nāga Loka, stolen generations ago by greedy mortals. Only with its return could the waters be restored to harmony. Agreeing to this divine charge, the prince descended with Kakataka into the underworld. Crossing halls lit by bioluminescent vines and caverns where gemstones grew like living flowers. There he met Vasuki, who bestowed upon him not only the quest but a promise of protection, no creature of the deep, serpent or otherwise, would harm him so long as his intent was pure. Shimmering anklets forged from river pearls were clasped around his boots, allowing him to tread safely upon the unpredictable flows of Patala's waterways. Meanwhile, in the upper realms, Takshaka dealt with matters of tension. Encounters between his kind and human settlements were growing more frequent, often ending in bloodshed from misunderstanding and fear. Takshaka had little patience for human folly, but understood a truth known to all wise Nagas. To eradicate humanity's ignorance was near impossible. Yet, to completely sever ties would starve both worlds of the exchanges that kept destiny moving forward. He quietly dispatched his own scouts after Devadatta, both to ensure the prince's survival and to verify that his heart remained untainted by greed. In the spiritual currents of this unfolding saga, omens multiplied. Fishermen on the surface found there nets tangled in coils of golden-scaled serpents that vanished when touched. Rivers swelled without warning, revealing for moments the glimmer of sculpted stone temples long buried beneath their depths, Naga shrines lost to time. In remote forests, travelers swore they saw enormous eyes glowing in the shadows, watching but never attacking. The deeper Devadatta journeyed into Patala, the more he began to feel a strange duality within himself. At times his thoughts were sharp and human, full of strategy and doubt. At others, an ancient instinct stirred in him, responding to the pulse of subterranean rivers and the subtle vibrations of scales brushing over stone. In dreams now, the pearl-skinned woman came closer than ever before, and he learned her name, Anantika, daughter of the river goddess and pledged to guard the amulet of Nāga Loka. She revealed that she could not return it to the surface without mortal aid, for the oath binding her people forbade them from crossing into that realm while in possession of it. He woke from these visions with renewed resolve, sensing that his quest was not only for the Naga's survival, but for some intricate, not tying his fate to theirs. As he moved further from the upper crust of the world, he found within himself a humility and wonder that dissolved the fear with which he had once thought of serpents. In the flick of a hood and the glint of an eye, he saw whole histories, loyalties, and griefs as old as mountains. Thus the threads of destiny tightened, an ancient kingdom fighting the slow poison of human greed. A young prince stepping into a web of cosmic debt, and the serpent gods themselves, walking the razor edge between wrath and mercy. Somewhere in the deep, the amulet lay waiting, its power breathing in rhythm with the waters of the world. And above, the skies gathered heavy with rain, as if the heavens themselves were leaning down to listen. The journey toward the amulet of Nāga Loka carried Devadatta and his silent Naga guides deeper into the labyrinth of Patala, where even time seemed to quiver and lose shape. There was no distinction of day or night, the glow of the gems embedded in cavern walls, the soft shimmer of ghostly waters, and the bioluminescent pulse of plant life painted the world in an eternal otherworldly dusk. The deeper they went, the more the air thickened with the scent of minerals, old magic, and stillness so profound it drew the prince into states of meditation without conscious effort. His escorts, a pair of vigilant negas from Karkotoka's kin, spoke little, their lithe bodies weaving silently through tunnels that opened into grand chambers, each more surreal than the last. One such hall was vast enough to hold an entire mortal city, its ceiling carved from a slab of quartz clear as frozen water. Beneath that crystal sky stood pillars sculpted into giant serpent forms, their scales adorned with veins of silver and gold. In each statue's mouth rested a pearl, and Devadatta felt, without being told, that these were guardians, faithful watchers carved in honor of real Nagas, who had once given their lives in defense of the realm's sacred treasures. The whispering currents of the underworld rivers echoed inside the chamber, and in those shifting notes Devadatta caught glimpses of voices, memories, perhaps, speaking from the past. Beyond this hall lay the chamber of ancestral currents, a sanctum few mortals had ever seen. Here the veins of sacred water converged into a glimmering pool so deep that even Naga eyes could not fully pierce its bottom. This, the guides told him, was where all waters of Patala eventually met before flowing back into the mortal world's rivers and oceans. The amulet's theft had disturbed this convergence, creating whirlpools of conflicting tides that risked collapsing the delicate flow. Devadatta saw the evidence with his own eyes, the slow-moving spiral of disturbed currents, pulling at the edges of the pool like a wound refusing to close. Anantika came to him here for the first time in her waking form, not merely as a dream phantom. Rising from the pool in a robe woven from strands of moonlight. Her eyes mirrored every shade of the waters she protected: emerald, deep cobalt, stormy gray. Around her arms were coiled slender serpents with milky white scales, symbols of her divine oath. She spoke softly, but her voice reverberated in the chamber, as though the waters themselves carried her words. She explained that the amulet of Nāga Loka had originally been gifted to the Nagas by Varuna himself, not merely as a sign of trust but as a living seal balancing tides, rains, and the secret channels through which the elixirs of life passed between mortal and celestial realms. Ages ago, in a time now lost to human records, ambitious kings sought the amulet for its rumored power to command floods or droughts at will. They sent armies into territories they barely understood, awakening wrath among the Nagas. The amulet was taken to the surface, hidden in a temple far from water's edge, and its absence began the slow unweaving of natural harmony. Though some generations had passed peacefully, the imbalance had now grown too great to ignore. Yet, the amulet could not simply be seized back. It had an oath upon it, binding its spirit to the first mortal hand that had taken possession generations ago, and thereafter to the bloodline of that thief. To return it lawfully, it must be willingly offered by a descendant. That, Anantika revealed with a grave expression, was the very lineage to which Devadatta unknowingly belonged. The revelation struck the prince with a weight, that made the still cavern air feel suddenly heavy. His great-grandfather, revered in his kingdom's history as a just ruler, had, in truth, been the one to order the theft. The amulet had likely been passed down, hidden and guarded, but its legacy was now bound in his own blood. Anantika's gaze seemed to cut through the layers of shock, not unkind, but piercing in its sincerity. She told him this was why he had been summoned. The amulet would answer to none but him, for no other mortal could touch it without invoking the curse of the waters eternal. The path forward was clear but perilous. The amulet was not resting unattended, but sealed deep within the temple of withering petals in his homeland. An ancient and largely forgotten sanctuary, now guarded by both mortal priests and lingering wards meant to repel Naga presence. Devadatta realized this was why the Nagas themselves could not retrieve it. He would have to return, navigate the human world's politics and defenses, and claim the amulet with the understanding that returning with it to Patala would shake the foundation of everything his court believed about their treasured royal history. Before parting from Anantika, Vasuki himself appeared, emerging from the shadows like moving sunlight on water. His eyes glimmered with something ancient and unfathomable, neither anger nor joy, but the vastness of deep time. He offered the prince a gift, a single scale from his own hood, luminous as if forged from condensed starlight. This would shield Devadatta from the poisons and tempests that might rise against him. But the Serpent King warned that no such magic could protect the prince's heart from the trials he would face among his own people. The return journey upward was unlike the descent. Accompanied now by both Kakatoka's watchful emissaries and a silent blessing from Anantika, Devadatta found that the tunnels subtly shifted to ease his passage, as though the land itself acknowledged the purpose he carried. Strange visions visited him along the way, snakes twined in spirals around pillars of light, rivers reversing their flow, stars falling into oceans that did not drown them. The closer he came to the surface, the stronger the pull of mortal time and obligation became, tightening around him like invisible chains. When at last he emerged above ground, it was into the darkness of a cloudy night by the Yamuna's banks, where the sound of gentle waters seemed to echo the tones of Patala's deep rivers. Messengers awaited him here, disguised as ordinary villagers but with eyes that seemed far older than their bodies. They whispered that the Temple of Withering Petals had lately been disturbed by foreign treasure seekers, and that the outer sanctum's protective charms were weakening. Devadatta realized that delay could doom the cause. If the amulet were removed again, perhaps even sold or destroyed, the balance might never be restored. He set out at once toward the temple's hidden location, moving through familiar territories whose air now felt heavier to him, imbued with the silent awareness of all he had learned. The villagers he passed slept in ignorance of the cosmic fray raging beneath their feet. Yet here and there he saw small signs that hinted some still honored the ancient bonds. Earthen idols of serpent deities tucked into the roots of trees, bowls of milk left beside sacred stones, a child tracing serpent patterns in river mud. At the edges of his homeland's capital, Devadatta encountered resistance, not merely from guards wary of a prince moving without retinue, but from trusted advisors who had noticed his absence and feared the political whispers it had stirred. He spoke little, knowing that every word could spread, and sought shelter in the old quarter, near the place where the river Saraswati was said to have once flowed openly before vanishing underground. That night, Anantika's voice visited him one final time in his dreams, telling him the precise way to approach the temple's wards without triggering their full wrath. The Temple of Withering Petals lay cloaked in overgrown gardens whose blossoms were pale and strange, some with scents sweet enough to daze and others sharp enough to cut through thought. It bore no sign to hint at the relic within. The carvings on its gates were of flowers shedding their petals to reveal coiled serpents at the core, a reminder that beauty and danger, life and death, were never far apart in the old ways. Now, on the threshold of both his people's concealed sins and the hope of cosmic restoration, Devadatta stepped forward. Above him, the clouds parted briefly, allowing a shard of moonlight to fall upon the temple door, glinting off the serpent scale at his breast. He felt the pulse of distant waters surge once more through his veins, as if Patala itself was watching. And far below, in the jeweled halls of the Serpent Kings, Visuki, Takshaka, Kakotaka, and Anantika gathered, their gazes fixed inward through mystic sight, waiting to see whether the mortal heir of a thief could become the restorer of balance. Within the silent enclosure of the Temple of Withering Petals, Devadatta pressed against the heavy wooden doors studded with faded jewels and runes that glimmered faintly in the gloom. His pulse echoed, a twin to the shifting energies that he sensed, now pulsing in the stones beneath his feet. The scent that stole from the garden, tendrils of sweetness and sharpness, seemed to reach deep into his memory, stirring thoughts he'd never owned and feelings as old as the riverbeds themselves. The air here felt woven from two worlds, as if the whispered prayers of ancestors and the hisses of serpent gods tangled together above the threshold. The ancient hinge creaked as he eased the door open. Inside, the temple was empty of priests and acolytes, abandoned by living worshippers but inhabited by centuries of reverence and secrets. The central hall ran deep, framed by low torches burning with a blue-green flame, casting skins of light over muraled walls depicting scenes of kings kneeling before serpents, rivers overflowing their banks at a goddess's gesture, and a single, luminous jewel held aloft in a pair of entwined hands. Petals from the last season's blooms lay scattered on the floor, dried now to brittle husks, but still faintly radiant. Devadatta advanced, his footsteps slow and deliberate. He passed under archways carved with entwined cobras, whose eyes of opal seemed to follow him, holding centuries of silent judgment. He could feel the serpent scale Vasuki had gifted him warm against his chest, radiating a subtle energy that repelled the faint anxiety pressing at his thoughts and drew him forward as if the scale itself had become a beacon, calling him, guiding him. In the hush of the sanctum, the bond between mortal prince and Naga destiny tightened, a thread invisible but strong as the flow of ancient rivers. At the heart of the temple, the sanctum sanctorum was sealed by 3 concentric gates, each adorned with symbols of rain, flood, drought, and life in the coils of a great serpent. Devadatta knelt and murmured the prayer Anantika had placed in his mind. Words not of power or command, but of admission. An acknowledgement of the ignorance and greed that had sparked the theft, and a plea for permission to return what had never truly belonged to mortals. As his voice faded, the gates slid apart with a slow, silent movement, releasing a breath of cool, moist air thick with the scent of river stones and jasmine. Within, the chamber held a single dais carved from black stone, inlaid with streaks of blue and green. At its center rested the amulet of Nāga Loka, a pendant of impossible complexity fashioned from crystal, silver, and water itself perpetually swirling within its housing. Its light was both subtle and fierce, a miniature storm cloud trapped in jewel form. Devadatta's hand trembled as he reached out, yet the jewel seemed to sense him, pulsating briefly and then settling into a soft glow as his fingers closed around it. The moment he touched the amulet, a shock swept through him. An awareness fierce and ancient, as if the tides of the world sang through his blood. He glimpsed visions of the great churning, Samudramanthan, where Vasuki had served as the rope. Rivers born in darkness and spilling forth as light. Serpents wrapping themselves around lonely pillars in temple ruins, waiting for the return of something lost. He felt, for an instant, an enormous grief, the sorrow of rivers drying, fields shriveling, rain failing, and gods and mortals alike forgetting the delicate laws by which they shared the world. And with that grief came the promise of restoration, if he completed this act selflessly. The bonds would mend, and the cycles of harmony could resume. With the amulet safely in hand, Devadatta left the sanctuary, the temple's great doors closing with a hush behind him. As he moved into the moonlit garden, the air seemed to lighten, the strangling perfumes now gentler. In the corners of his vision, he glimpsed tiny serpents slithering through the vines, their scales catching the moonlight and trailing silvery reflections. It was said, in old stories, that the mortal who restored cosmic balance would be granted safe passage by all snake creatures, and now Devadatta felt no fear as they approached him, one by one, touching the hem of his robe with gentle flicks of their tongues, a silent blessing, an unspoken thanks. The journey back toward Patala was no longer a descent, but a pilgrimage. Accompanied again by disguised Naga messengers, Devadatta walked across the midnight fields and through forests that seemed to part at his approach. At river crossings he paused, feeling the pulse of the waters beneath his feet, the vibrations of thousands of serpent guardians tuning themselves to his passage. Mist snaked over the ground, bearing cool hints of the underworld's eternal light. Even the night breeze seemed charged with expectation. He had not gone unobserved. In the darkness, agents of Tokshaka navigated the shadows, testing him for failings. Rivals from the mortal world, treasure seekers, power-hungry priests, and spies attempted to intercept him. Yet, Vasuki's scale shielded him, not by physical force, but by weaving a spiritual veil around his presence. Those approaching would simply turn away, forgetting their aim, or find themselves diverted by some urgent need elsewhere. The teachings of the Nagas, he realized now, involved not just mastery of venom and strength, but an understanding of subtle flows, how to redirect danger without fostering violence, how to shape destiny with invisible hands. As Devadatta grew nearer to Patala's threshold, the landscape itself grew more dreamlike. Trees rose crooked and grand, their leaves shimmering in colors no human artist could paint. Ponds reflected not the sky, but inner visions. And in the deepest glade, a ring of cobras danced silently, their hoods swaying in perfect harmony. The prince paused, bowing to them, and for a moment he could almost hear Patala's awakening hum echoing in the earth beneath his feet. When at last he reached the appointed crossroads, where the Yamuna met the hidden tributary to the world below, the air quivered with a supernatural charge. Anantika awaited him there, haloed in moonlight and river mist, a smile gentle but proud on her lips. "You restored what was lost not only to us," she murmured, "but to the balance all worlds depend on." Her hands cupped his, and together they lowered the amulet into the sacred waters with a song both ancient and wordless. Instantly, the river surged, flooding the glade with a vitality so potent it seemed the air and light themselves renewed in color and strength. Flowers burst into fresh bloom, fishes leapt and sparkled, frogs sang out in joy, and in the currents below Patala, the sacred flows converged and undulated, mending the wound that had threatened to undo eons of harmony. Below, in Bhogavati, Vasuki unfurled himself in stately satisfaction. Takshaka nodded, his eyes narrowed in a smile both sly and sincere. Kakatoka's kin slithered through the royal halls, their scales flashing in celebration. A great bell song rang out from the central palace, echoing through the crystal spires, a gesture of unity and blessing. In the deepest sanctum, Shisha opened one eye and watched as the restored amulet pulsed with a tide of planetary energies. The stars seemed to shift with approval. Rain clouds gathered at the horizons, promising a season of fruitfulness. On the surface, signs of healing spread. Rivers regained their regular course, crops flourished, and communities found peace where discord had ruled. People awoke, strangely refreshed, unaware that their world had teetered on the brink of cosmic imbalance. In villages by the Yamuna and the vanished Saraswati, old men and women felt compelled to make offerings to stone idols of Nagas. Some remembering dreams of a prince returning with a jewel in hand, some simply thanking the serpents for their silent guardianship. For Divadatta, something fundamental had changed. His awareness now held the memory of two realms, the mundane and the mystical, mortal striving and Naga wisdom. The prince returned to his people with humility greater than any crown could instill, bearing not trophies but the knowledge that unity, respect for hidden forces, and acceptance of ancient debts were the pillars of true prosperity. The stories grew around him in subtle rumors and fireside tales that he had been touched by Naga fate. Yet he kept his secret, honoring the promise to keep the world's mysteries intact until the time would come for new seekers to learn them once more. And within the jeweled courts of Bhogavati, the Nagas commemorated the restoration with week-long revels. The great river spirits and lesser serpent deities wove patterns of light through the halls. Hosts from allied realms, yakshas, Gandharvas, Apsaras, visited, offering music and gifts. Vasuki himself presided with dignity, blessing all who bore witness to the healing. Kakotaka spun stories for the youngest Nagas, tales of humans who honored the old bonds, while Takshaka sharpened his wit against the visiting sages. Even Shisha, eternal in meditation, let his cosmic coils gleam brighter in the ether. The balance between worlds, fragile, earned and never guaranteed, once again pulsed at the heart of things. For the Nagas, and for those rare humans who remembered, the renewal brought not only peace but the promise that every age would find its heroes. Its seasons of loss and unity, and the serpent gods waiting, coiled in patience, wisdom, and an endless dance between earth and water, mortality and divinity. The days of celebration in the Naga kingdom unfolded with a ritual beauty that seemed to touch every crevice of Bhogavati and ripple outward to the most distant tributaries where the youngest serpents played. Flowers of impossible brilliance blossomed in the underwater gardens, reflecting glints of emerald, sapphire, and pearl from the palace walls. Zephyrs flowed in and out of crystal windows, carrying echoes of laughter, song, and the fluting voices of river spirits who had come to honor the restored alliance between Earth and Patala. The eternal dusk of the underworld glowed more gently than ever, as if the very stones were singing praise for the restoration of the cosmic bond. Vasuki, regal in his crown of entwined lotus stems and dazzling gems, presided over the revels, his eyes gleaming with a wisdom so old that even the river gods leaned in to listen when he spoke. Karkotaka, mischievous and sly, constricted and released spirals of mist, shaping them into fleeting images that danced along the gardens. A prince holding a jewel, a goddess awakening the rivers, a mortal kneeling before a serpent in gratitude. Takshaka, his scales dark as midnight but shot through with gold, hosted contests of wit and strength among his kin, teaching through trickery and parable the art of discerning truth even in the flicker of forked tongues. On the first day, a great assembly was called. The council halls opened to all beings who had walked or slithered the ancient paths, lesser serpent gods, river nymphs, yaksha attendants, even a few invitingly curious Gandharvas whose songs danced on the currents of deep water. Sages from nearby realms arrived too, some wrapped in seaweed robes, some shimmering in the hues of dawn. The elders recited sacred legends, punctuating the tales with symbols and conch shells, the sound reverberating through every chamber and vault. Anantika took her turn, stepping to the center beneath the glimmering lamps. She spoke with a power both gentle and commanding, recounting the history of the amulet of Nāga Loka, the times of harmony, the theft, the slow unraveling, and the renewal achieved through courage and humility. Her words did not disguise the sorrow that had preceded this victory, and her listeners, both Naga and visiting spirit, bowed their heads to honor all who had endured the centuries of unbalance. As Anantika's story finished, Vasuki declared the renewal of the ancient pact. The rivers would flow freely again, crops would thrive, and mortals and Nagas would share the earth, each honoring the other's place in the order of things. The great Serpent King lifted his hood, and as he spoke, his voice merged with the silent chorus of the river itself, promising peace as long as respect remained. Each attendee took part in the ritual pouring of milk into the river's central pool, a gesture centuries old, symbolizing nourishment, blessing, and the kindred spirits that bound every creature, mortal or immortal. Next came the games of the younger Nagas, spiraling through the halls and gardens. The young serpents competed in feats both playful and fierce, who could swim the length of the glistening veil first, who could coil around the highest spire, who could conjure the most beautiful pattern in the reflecting pools. Their laughter mingled with the music, rising higher with each contest. Occasionally, they paused to look toward the surface, reminding themselves that the bonds formed here would echo for generations in the mortal world above. Far away, in sleepy surface villages and bustling cities, subtle signs of renewal appeared. Snake charmers found their serpents oddly placid, even friendly, basking in the sun. Children dreamed of gardens where rainbow-scaled cobras whispered secrets to them. Farmers, weary of drought, awoke to find sudden blooms in fields where nothing had grown for years. Monsoon rains fell as gentle benedictions, neither flooding nor failing, and rivers wound serenely through the land, lavishing their blessings. The Hindu festival of Nag Panchami arrived, and never before had the prayers and offerings felt so abundantly received. Even skeptics sensed a buoyancy in the world, as if an ancient debt had been quietly forgiven. In the Naga halls, Divadatta was honored as a guest. not as a ruler or hero, but as a seeker who had preserved the link between realms. He wore no crown, only a simple robe and Vasuki's luminous scale at his throat. The Nagas treated him with a respect unfamiliar to mortal courts. None bowed, but all greeted him as an equal, seeing in him neither superiority nor inferiority, but kinship earned through humility. He listened, asked questions, and learned about the complex cycles of river and rain, about the secret languages of serpents, and about the old stories that mortals had forgotten but the Nagas knew by heart. As the celebrations unfolded, ancient mysteries came alive once more. In one hall, Shisha, the endless serpent whose coils hold worlds, opened his many eyes and spoke in riddles. The universe is not held by force, he told those assembled, but by balance. Each shedding of the skin is a lesson in renewal. Each wound, a chance to heal the greater pattern. Sages pondered his words for days, writing poems and meditating in the crystal alcoves. In another alcove, young Nagas studied the patterns of jewels in the walls, learning how each alignment represented a sequence of events in the earth's history. Flood, drought, plenty, and famine woven together by the choices of both gods and mortals. In secret corners, storytellers weave tales of Nagas who once married humans, the tragic story of Alupi, the Naga princess who wed Arjuna in the epic Mahabharata, gifting wisdom and protection before returning to her hidden realm. An old river goddess invited to the festival sang her saga, how she once embraced the world in her currents, but withdrew when mortals forgot her name, returning only now to drink in the harmony restored. Each legend spun was tied, at route, to the idea that separation, while sometimes needed, could always be healed through compassion, wisdom, and respect. Meanwhile, the elders and priests prepared for a ritual far older and more sacred than most remembered, the renewal of the waters. This ceremony was held only once every yuga, upon the return of balance between earth and underworld. Vasuki led the procession, his scales radiant, carrying the amulet of Nāga Loka. He was followed by Anantika, Shisha, Takshaka, Karkotaka, and a host of river spirits who held cups of sacred nectar. Devadatta was invited to walk among them, carrying an olive branch, a symbol of mortal peace and gratitude. At the edge of the central pool, the amulet was submerged, its light spreading in concentric ripples that illuminated even the darkest crannies of Patala. Every serpent deity and spirit joined in a wordless chant, the song rising through water and stone, winding its way up through the earth to touch the rivers, wells, and seas above. In that moment, the world shivered, not in fear, but in realization. Cosmic ripples of blessing suffused the globe, settling not only in fields and forests, but in hearts that had long needed healing. The ritual ended with silence, a quiet so deep and resonant that all who witnessed it were changed. The weeks of celebration ended with one final gathering. Vasuki spoke to those assembled, reminding them that the renewal brought not only joy but duty. The world, ever balanced on a blade, required vigilance and respect. The Nagas must continue as guardians, not only of treasures and hidden knowledge, but of the bonds between realms. A serpent is only feared by those who do not know its dance, he said. Let our dance be one of harmony, for as long as wisdom endures. Devadatta, preparing to return to the mortal world, felt both peace and longing. He asked Anantika if he would ever be welcome again in Bhogavati. She smiled and touched his hand, placing a tiny river pearl in his palm. Whenever you see the rivers tremble in moonlight, whenever a gentle rain falls without warning, remember that we still watch and wait, and the doors of Patala open to all who seek with humility. As Dividetta crossed the hidden channel back to the realm of daylight, the veil between worlds did not close entirely. Instead, it shimmered, transparent, promising an invitation and a warning. In every garden, river bend, and temple on earth, the serpent god's stories lingered. People may forget, but the Nagas remembered, and the cosmic dance of renewal and restoration moved quietly onward, whispering its secrets in the rustle of scales, the song of water, and the very pulse of the world. The mortal world welcomed Devadatta's return with the quiet embrace of familiar landscapes, yet nothing felt entirely the same to him anymore. The colors of dawn over the fields seemed richer. The murmur of streams in the distance carried distinct tones like the voices of old friends. Even the shadows beneath banyan trees hinted at concealed passageways into deeper realities. Though the people of his kingdom knew nothing of his sojourn in Patala, they sensed in him a change, less the restless energy of a prince and more the patient, unshakable glow of one who had seen the architecture of the world from its foundations upward. In the early weeks after his return, Devadatta moved among his people quietly. He did not speak of the amulet or the Nagas, but he found himself introducing small acts of reverence into daily life, honoring the first rains not only with public festivity, but also with offerings left at riverbanks, encouraging farmers to protect the small winding streams and groves, urging the court priests to restore old shrines that had fallen into disrepair. Where he went, subtle changes followed. Water usage became more mindful, temple gardens flourished, and the old serpent motifs, long neglected, began to re-emerge in painted doorframes and carved lintels. Far away, beyond what the human eye could perceive, messengers of the Nagas kept watch. Some took the form of iridescent dragonflies skimming the paddy fields. Others were tiny grass snakes dozing in the sun beside wells. Their purpose was not to intrude, only to observe, to ensure that the balance struck at such cost would be faithfully nurtured. Every now and then, in the stillness before dawn, Devadatta thought he could hear the faint rustle of their unseen coils and felt reassured. But not all forces in the mortal realm rejoiced at the restoration. In shadowed courts distant from Devadatta's own, there were those who coveted control over weather and water, who had heard rumors, distorted through countless retellings of a wondrous jewel and a prince's midnight journey. Some, skilled in the older and darker magics, began to search for traces of this relic, unaware that returning it to mortal hands could collapse the order of seasons entirely. The Nagas, too wise to ignore such ambitions, had already set subtle wards in motion, weaving enchantments through rainfall patterns and river currents to confound any reckless searchers. While these undercurrents stirred in obscurity, in Bhogavati the Nagas turned from celebration to vigilance. The renewal of the waters had been a triumph, but Vasuki knew that a victory undone by negligence was no victory at all. He summoned his council once more, and this time the mood was sober. Shisha, in his timeless voice, spoke of cycles, how each age bore within it the seeds of its own destruction and rebirth, and how guardianship was a living duty, not a relic of past oaths. Takshaka, ever pragmatic, took it upon himself to strengthen the hidden roots between Patala and the surface, ensuring they remained secret from any unworthy eyes. Karkotaka dispatched his swiftest kin to maintain quiet contact with humans who, like Devadatta, could be entrusted with fragments of the old agreements. Anantika returned to her vigil at the convergence pool, the amulet of Varunaloka, now anchored there, its glow steady and deep, synchronizing with the rhythms of every river, stream, and ocean current. Months passed. The mortal world enjoyed a rare equilibrium, good harvests, temperate rains, and peace in the borderlands. The people, though unaware of the cosmic bargain holding their fortune together, began to cultivate a revived gratitude toward the rivers. During festivals, children sang verses older than memory, their words invoking blessings from the lords of coil and current. Images of Nagas, once relegated to dusty corners of folklore, appeared openly in markets and temples again, painted in bright colors or carved in smooth stone. Yet, amid this serenity, Devadatta sometimes felt a pull, an undercurrent, in his spirit urging him further along the path he had begun. Though the amulet's duty was fulfilled, the broader work of harmony was never-ending. On certain nights, when moonlight silvered the water's surface just so, he sensed that the veil between worlds thinned. In those shimmering moments, he thought he saw Anantika's reflection beside his own, her eyes carrying both encouragement and a reminder that the story was not over. One evening, as the warm season began to tilt toward early rains, a dream came to him unlike the others. He stood again before the vast crystalline ceiling of Bhogavati's great hall. But this time, it was darkened by shadow, not a malevolent force, but a kind of eclipse, a sign that one cycle was ending and another beginning. From the shadowed ceiling, drops of light began to fall into his hands, each one holding images, forests, mountains, cities, endless coils of water and serpent forms. A voice, which might have been Shisha's, whispered, "Balance must be renewed, not only after loss, but continually, in each choice, each thought." He woke with the strange sensation of being listened to, as though the world itself awaited his next actions. The call was subtle but profound, if the old harmony was to endure. A deeper alliance between humanity and the guardians of Patala would need to grow in the generations to come. He understood then that his journey had not ended when he left the underworld. It had only shifted onto a quieter but no less vital plane. And somewhere beneath the earth's crust, in the jeweled sanctums of the Naga realm, Vasuki and his council reflected on the same truth. The threads connecting water, serpent, and mortal hearts were weaving into new patterns. What had begun as the restoration of an amulet might, in time, become the restoration of a shared destiny. The vision that had come to Devadatta lingered long after he awoke. It was not merely a dream, but a summons, a reminder that the renewed bond between mortals and Nagas was a living thing, delicate as a lotus petal and strong as the deepest current, yet only if both worlds tended it with care. The morning after that dream, he walked to the banks of the Yamuna, alone, and stood watching the dawn ripple over the surface. Every swell and eddy seemed to speak, and though there were no words, he understood. The waters and their guardians were still listening, still awaiting his choices. In the Naga realm of Bhogavati, the same call reverberated. Vasuki, seated in quiet council with Shisha, Anantika, Takshaka, and Karkotaka, spoke of a future in which the Nagas must step from pure secrecy into subtle communion, with the mortal world. The harmony will fade unless they remember us, Vasuki intoned, his hood casting a great crescent shadow across the pearl-strewn floor. Not in fear, not as monsters of the earth's depths, but as keepers of the cycle that sustains them. Shisha, ever the voice of eternity, nodded slowly. And memory must be carried in stories, in symbols, in living acts. So it was decided the Nagas would seed signs, glimpses of their presence in the mortal realm. These would not be grand displays, but quiet reminders, a cobra resting peacefully near an offering bowl in a village square. Mysterious patterns in river silt that mirrored the curling coils of Naga art. Dreams sent to poets and wise women who would awaken to compose hymns and parables in the old style. Anantika herself took on the task of guiding these dreams, ensuring they fell to receptive minds who would carry the essence of Naga wisdom into songs, festivals, and daily ritual. Divadatta, feeling this growing tide, began traveling beyond his kingdom. He visited distant villages and cities, often in the guise of an unremarkable wanderer, weaving stories into the conversations of travelers' inns and marketplaces. He would speak of rivers that were alive, of serpents that could teach patience, of cycles that connected rain clouds to seeds, seeds to gardens, gardens to human breath. Some laughed him off as an eccentric. Others remembered his words at odd times and found in them a spark of reverence for the unseen forces folding themselves into daily life. In places of drought, he urged communities to honor the dormant streams and not fill them with refuse. In flood-prone lands, he spoke of ways to work with the river's moods, creating spill fields and sacred wetlands. These were humble things, far removed from the grandeur of palaces and courts. But they were the sorts of acts the dream had urged, small. Continuous renewals of balance that could prevent the greater disasters that required heroes and amulets. Back in Bhogavati, the seasons passed in an unbroken rhythm. The amulet of Nāga pulsed steadily in the convergence pool, its light diffusing like steady rain through the networks of water veins. The young Nyagas who had once only played in the gardens now listened to the elders' instructions, learning not just the lore of their own kind, but also the intricacies of mortal behavior, its folly, its brilliance, and its potential for harmony. Takshaka, though still wary of human ambition, admitted in council that some mortals might be worth cautiously befriending. Kakotaka reported encounters with wandering ascetics who honored the serpents with respect. We mustn't forget, Anantika added, that the mortal heart can grow as surely as a seed in fertile soil, if we give it the patience we give our rivers. Over the years, the threads of connection subtly strengthened. Festivals honoring the Nagas grew richer in meaning. Travelers spoke of seeing impossible reflections in still pond waters. Children dreamed of vast underworld gardens and awoke with calm smiles. Though the veil between realms stayed mostly sealed, certain moments, festivals, moonlit rains, the rare meeting of river and sea, thinned it enough for blessings to flow more freely. And always, in the weave of these stories and signs, Devadatta's path continued. He never returned to his royal role in the way his predecessors had lived it. Instead, he became a kind of wandering steward, a bridge between the worlds, answering in his quiet way the same summons that had first led him deep beneath the earth. His own name faded from prominence, becoming instead part of local legends, a nameless prince, a river pilgrim, a man who once walked with the serpent gods. In time, both the mortal and Naga realms accepted this new phase, a lasting connection maintained not by one great act, but by 1,000 small ones, scattered like seeds in the wind. Vasuki, watching the patterns of river currents from his crystal dais, allowed himself the rare motion of a smile, knowing the work they had all done would flow on beyond this age. And so the tale of the amulet of Loka, of the prince and the serpent gods, lived on, not simply in the jeweled halls of Patala or the whisper of river reeds, but wherever human hands cupped water with gratitude, wherever stories were told on long, warm nights, and wherever respect for the hidden guardians of the earth was quietly renewed. For the Nagas had shown, and the mortals had learned, that balance is not a victory, but a practice, and that creation and renewal will always coil together, endless as the serpent form itself. Thus, the dance of the snake gods and their world continued, gliding unseen beneath rivers and dreams, beneath soil and story, as eternal as the cycles that bind water to life, and life to the deep and shining mystery underfoot.